Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Brian. Sadly, not joining us this week is your co-host, Jim. He is, I believe, on a cruise. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct. Yep.
Where is he cruising? He didn't really tell me anything. What's going on?
He's in the Bahamas, baby.
Whoa. Okay, that's pretty awesome. Good for him. Well, also joining us is your co-host, Hunter.
Brian, let me tell you something.
Wow.
If the moon was made out, would you eat it? Hell, I would. I'd eat the whole thing. Hey!
I'd eat all of it, and then I'd shit it out. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, excuse the language. It just kind of flowed. Also joining us...
It's been one of those days, Brian. It's been one of those days.
Also joining us is your co-host, Spaz.
Hello.
And joining us from our neighbor to the north, Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta, the head of Star Trek Interactive, Jeff Graw, with us here today.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Jeff is here to talk about Dominus Galaxia, which we're going to get to in a second, but a little bit of news, a little bit of bookkeeping before we start. The big news today, Mobile Stellaris was just announced as of today. What's it called? Stellaris Command or some such nonsense? Don't you all have phones? I don't know. I think this is... I'm never going to play it. I don't play Stellaris anyway, but I'm not going to play it on my phone. I would never play Stellaris on my phone. You know?
Well, I think there was a conversation that happened earlier in our Discord that was kind of echoing to the point that I actually agree with, which is like mobile gaming is an interesting direction to take things in, because on one hand you have a younger generation who is growing up with it and is kind of all over it, and you have marketplaces where like a lot of the younger generation will have mobile phones, but they don't necessarily have computers or consoles or any of those kinds of things. And someone was pointing out that like occasionally they'll play Command and Conquer, whatever that thing is on mobile. You know, it's like at most I'm sitting in front of it for like 15 minutes. And I thought about that too, because I play a couple little mobile games here and there, usually when I'm doing my morning routine, if you know what I mean. And it's kind of like I've only got like 5 minutes. You know, I'm only going to look at this for like maybe 10 minutes at most. You know, I'm not sitting down to play like hour-long play sessions unless like I'm on a flight somewhere. And typically, I'm not going to be using my phone to play games while traveling. Typically, you know, that's why, you know, like, so that's me. And I can definitely see like a market for this for somebody. It's just not most of us, I would assume here.
No. I don't really game on my phone. I like hardly ever game on my phone. And if I do, it's like solitaire or mahjong or something, like something really simple and quick. It's like I have 3 seconds. No, if I'm on my phone, I'm reading Twitter or reading Reddit or reading a forum or checking our Discord or, you know, or all this. I have a computer to play. It's hard for me. It's like I play games on this beautiful 27-inch, you know, monitor, and then it's like, oh, you want me to play a game on this little? Okay.
Well, what's interesting about like that, and then this kind of bleeds into like the Stadia and remote gameplay and streaming gameplay, is you have a whole community of people who are commuters, right? They're public transportation folks,
point.
Right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know, Spaz works from home, if I'm not mistaken. And, Brian, you currently work from home, but you did commute. I commute to work. You know, but I don't use public transit, right? So I can definitely see the appeal for people who are, you know, sitting on trains or buses or whatever for like an hour in the morning. They're looking for something to do, maybe watch a YouTube video or play a game. So
I'm not a market. There is a market for this.
There totally is a market. I just don't understand it, nor am a part of it.
What's funny is recently I picked up like an adapter that connects. It's like a clamp that holds my phone and connects to my Xbox controller. And so, like, I can sit and play games on my phone. Like, I have an
that'd be
app
nice.
that lets me. Well, I do a lot of in-home streaming because I stream games like while I'm in home. So, like,
Right.
if I had a bad case of the nachos, I can continue to play Halo while I'm taking care of business because I have an app on my phone that lets me do that. But I mean, there's a use case for everything, but I also like tinkering with technology. So
that's fair.
I do dabble, but I mean, when you're talking about long gameplay sessions, it's not going to be.
This is not Sins of the Solar Empire sort of gameplay where you're going to be sitting there for a while.
Yeah,
right. And mobile's designed differently. Mobile's not designed for necessarily long gameplay sessions anyway. So I think people need to give them the benefit of the doubt and just wait till it comes out because it's not for everybody, right? It's not like it's the next installment of Stellaris per se. This isn't like Stellaris 2 on your phone.
Oh god.
This isn't like Diablo 4 on your phone.
Right. The other thing worth mentioning is they really haven't put out much information about it yet. And there has been some backlash we noticed, but people should really temper their expectations because if this is just a side thing and not the next thing, if they're not dropping their main,
that's a good point.
The main franchise, the main part of the franchise, in order to pivot to mobile, then
which they're not. Then where is the problem? It's another option for people who have phones and use them regularly for gaming.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's kind of my stance on it too.
Yeah, it's interesting how some PC developers have moved almost entirely to mobile. Like the guy who made the Evercron games, he's moving pretty much.
Yeah,
but
he's also a single developer though, right?
Yes, he is a single developer. Yes,
I can, but you see, I can understand that move though. You know what I mean? Like the market is ripe right now for the mobile development scene when you can make almost as much, if not more, on a single app for a mobile device than you were making for your very niche PC. More people have mobile devices than they do a PC. Yeah.
And they're just getting more powerful.
That's my thought. Yeah.
Well, that's the sort of tension point, I suppose, is that if you go for a specific niche, it's easier to market to it. If you go more broad, then you have a larger possible install base, but you're competing with so many other properties for their attention.
Right. That's true too.
And you only really know about the mobile games that make it big. You don't know about the 10 others for every one that just don't go anywhere either. Although I somewhat disagree with the sort of 5-minute thing, because I know that there are quite a few actually successful mobile games out there that try and demand a lot of time. I generally dislike those, like the Clash of Clans, those sort of things. People are playing those for long periods of time, not just 5 minutes at a time necessarily. And a lot of them are designed that way, where they have, timers that you need to check every 30 minutes to get a reward.
Well, I have a question about that. Yeah. I'm curious to know if there's a way to find out, and there might not be. But I have recently come into the understanding of Android emulators for the PC that fully work and that can run multiple instances of an Android session,
like BlueStacks.
That apparently can fully run these games and can connect online. Yeah, I'm wondering about that audience, how much there is there.
That is interesting. I haven't done it myself, but I know multiple people who have done it. So if that's any indication, it's probably not insignificant. Not nearly as much as the guys running it on their phones, though, I imagine, but it's there.
Right. Well, moving on to an actual good 4X. Yeah.
Wait, which was the bad 4X we were talking about?
I don't like Stellaris. I'm just going to be perfectly frank. I don't like Stellaris. I haven't liked it from the beginning. and
Well,
I still don't like it.
well, before we jump into Jeff's game real quick,
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say that Jim and I took a dive the other night into the latest build of Stellaris to try and check out what has come since we played it probably over a year plus ago.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to report that it is a lot better than it has ever been.
Really?
They have changed so many of the way the systems function, especially with planetary and sector stuff, where you don't even manage or deal with sectors anymore, at least not from what I've seen.
What?
It's all like handled in the background for you. It's like a background mechanic. And like at least when I was touching it, like when we were playing it, like I had planets in different sectors, but I wouldn't have known any different. And it didn't affect anything else. Like it was just like, it's almost like sectors became constellations. It's like this planet you own is over in this constellation. This planet over here is, these planets over here are part of this sector, this constellation over here. And it was interesting because like I didn't have to manage that like thing. I didn't have to like open up a sectors window and manage my sector. Like it's just like I never touched it.
So yeah. That's interesting. When I played Stellaris, it was a while back. I didn't really take to it, but the way that they're doing it in this sort of like iterative fashion where they just keep going back and revisiting the gameplay systems, some people say that they like certain things better in previous versions, but for myself, I really appreciate that, and it's not something you see very often, and it's commendable that they keep trying to make the game better.
Yeah, so I was really surprised by that, and it was also the smoothest gameplay session that we ever had. Like, the game didn't crash the game didn't start lagging on us. It was challenging, but not overwhelming. It was interesting. Like it was the best experience I've had with Stellaris to date, and I'm actually curious about getting back into. I would honestly recommend checking it out again just to kind of see where it's at and what you think, because
all right,
especially you, Brian.
Yeah,
fine.
That's interesting.
I guess I'll get the expansions and blah 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 and try it out. I guess. I mean,
it's felt like 2 or 3 different games by this point, just with how much they've changed. On the other hand, I also understand they've been making these changes in order to make the game better overall. So
that's fair.
Although the one thing that seems like it's a little bit more of a concession and maybe a step backwards is changing from multiple different ways to move fleets around to just the star lanes. Since that was interesting when Sword of the Stars did it, and maybe it had some problems. And
I don't know. I think Sword of the Stars.
I also maybe suspect that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Oh, I also sort of suspect maybe some of those performance improvements you saw with the smoother gameplay. Maybe some of that's due to doing away with that system, where now you don't need to do pathfinding multiple different ways, and you can do a little bit of shortcuts with the star lanes because you have fewer nodes going to fewer places.
That actually made the mechanic interesting because I had my borders cut off by a different faction, and I couldn't explore out until I resolved my differences with that faction.
Just intellectually curious, with the new system, can you travel outside the star lanes at a reduced speed, or is it? Are you completely?
I was not seeing any other mode of travel other than star lanes.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate people have about those.
Well, I think you can traverse wormholes if you research.
Right.
If you find a wormhole.
Which are basically just long star lanes.
Yes.
Totally fair.
It's kind of a shame that
maybe, I guess.
That it's kind of a shame that hardly anyone beyond Sword of the Stars really nailed that multi-transit dynamic. They nailed it in that game.
They did.
And your game is trying that too. Let's segue into your game, because I saw that happen. Well,
it's a little bit different.
I saw that happen today while I was playing. I was playing a race that had to use star lanes, and I ran to a race that didn't.
Oh, I can actually explain that. You're actually seeing something a little bit different than what you think you're seeing.
Then what am I seeing?
So in Dominus Galaxia, first of all, since we're talking about star lanes, I always need to do this qualifier because a lot of people really don't like star lanes. So I need to do the qualifier here that you can play without star lanes. It's an optional advanced gameplay feature. So you can play just like Master of Orion 1, or you can connect things with star lanes. But when you connect everything with a star lane, you can also travel outside the star lane network. This happens at a reduced speed. Right now, it's 25% speed. But you can also change it, like I haven't exposed it in game, but there's like a little variables file, and you can change a whole bunch of mechanics and formulas and everything in there. And one of the things that you can change is the star lane deficit. So you could actually set it to like instead of like 4, you could set it to 0.25, and then travel outside the star lanes would be faster than travel inside of it. So you could do interesting stuff like that. But the interesting thing about this is that this is maybe one of my weaknesses. Sometimes I just get an idea and I just start doing something on a whim because I think it's cool. Less like that more often. Now I'm a lot more focused on just, getting all the core remaining stuff in, and so I can slap 1.0 on it when it gets to that point. But one day I decided, what, I bet I could do star lanes. I'll just do it the same way as I do the rest of the terrain, which is you have various things like slow nebula that slows you down when you pass through it. And I'm saying, what if I just make the game basically think that there's slow nebula everywhere except for between the worlds with star lanes? So internally, it all works the same. It's just that the geometry of space has been kind of warped in this odd way. And then you just put the star lanes visual. But the artificial intelligence, it has no concept of here's a star lane or here's not a star lane. It just thinks, hey, I have this star system. It's connected to all these other star systems, and these are the distances. Now, the bad/good thing about that is that was actually pretty easy for me to implement, but it ended up exposing a whole bunch of really weird edge cases just because of the weird geometry where things didn't quite work the way that you'd expect them to. So I ended up spending more time fixing those than I did actually implementing the star lanes themselves, which is bad because it took a long time, but it's good because I'm fixing issues even if they're very rare otherwise.
Right. So for folks who aren't fully aware, we're talking about a game called Dominus Galaxia. It is currently in Kickstarter, and unlike 95% of the Space 4X games out there, it's not trying to emulate Master of Orion 2. Because, Jesus Christ, they're all trying to fucking emulate Master of Orion 2. Every goddamn one of... No, I'm sorry. I get really tired of it. Excuse my language. But you're leaning more toward... What if Master of Orion 1... What if the Master of Orion series kind of stayed in that direction of Master of Orion 1, but had more stuff? And I gotta say I like that, because I played Master of Orion 2 first. Yeah. I didn't play the first one for a long time. And when I played the first one, I'm like, why aren't more people copying this?
Sword of the Stars did, to an extent.
To an extent,
and it's a classic.
Yeah. It's such an elegant system. It's not fiddly. It's some people think it's too simple, but it isn't, because you still have a lot to juggle.
You have a lot to juggle. I'm going to go back around to that, but I'll let you continue. I have some things to say about the streamlining.
Oh, please. But it's still like such an efficient and wonderful system that just works so well. And I gained a lot more respect of it after starting to read the massive... Folks, if you haven't read the strategy guide for the original Master of Orion, which is like 500 pages of amazing, not just strategy for a game, but it's like a treatise on game 4X design, basically. And it's an amazing read. Even if you never play Master of Orion, it's worth finding a copy of that book because it's astounding. It's an astounding read. And I just gained so much more respect for the game after reading that too. I haven't even finished reading it. It's so bloody big. It's so bloody. Have you read that book?
Of course I've read that book. I think it's only like 330 pages, but also just since you mentioned it, it's an amazing read, but it's also full of little issues as well.
Oh.
It gets you kind of close to like what's happening in the background, but a lot of the stuff is either subtly or sometimes less subtly off. But it's still an amazing read.
Oh, amazing read! Like it
absolutely.
Yeah. So, what were you going to say about streamlining? Let's.
Yeah, sure. Well, first I'll say that with Master of Orion 1, it's a lot of it is that it's bigger than the sum of its parts, and that's not always the case for 4X games. Sometimes it ends up being a bit less than the sum of its parts. But with Master of Orion 1, it's kind of like all the systems with the ship design, the research, colony management, everything, combat, everything just sort of comes together in a cohesive way where everything's sort of supporting every other piece and sort of elevating it upwards with the maybe potential possible exception of spying, which tends to be a little bit obscure.
There are
a bit of a black box.
Sorry to interrupt, but there are
Dominus Galaxia at the moment. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to say, like, spying is one thing very few games get right. So that's really not its fault. Like, I can think of maybe one or two games where I thought spying was done well.
Birth of the Federation?
Oh, I was thinking...
That's a good one. Yes.
I was thinking Seven Kingdoms.
Interstellar Space Genesis is pretty good, too.
That is a good one. I was also thinking Seven Kingdoms.
Okay, I haven't
Kingdoms
played that
games. One. Oh, my God. Those are probably my favorites. Also, Imperium Galactica 2 had an excellent spying mechanic. But beyond that, most of the time spying is just, +1 to catching another spy. Oh, there's a 10% chance that they might get they might find a technology. It's like so boring. And
well, this is going to be a huge tangent here, but
go ahead. We love tangents.
That we expect this to happen. But for Dominus Galaxia, I've only pretty recently put in the spying system, and I probably would have liked to put a little bit more polish into it before the Kickstarter. It's just that I didn't really have the money to do it, so I had to get the Kickstarter done then and there.
Sure.
But there are a few interesting things. Namely, there's a relationship there between I guess you know, like the love nub in Master of Orion 1 that sort of tells you your relationship value with other people.
Excuse me. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're neutral or you're despised or you're in harmony, that sort of thing. So there's I'll try and start at the beginning here. Is that in Dominus Galaxia, that doesn't represent how the AI feels about you. What it represents is how each empire feels about one another. And it's driven by external events. And the reason for doing that is because the relationship modifiers or relationship values in most 4X games kind of feel like a one-way street where, you know, if you're playing multiplayer with a human, the relationship value doesn't matter. And if you're playing against an AI, it sort of constrains the AI to maybe work in ways that aren't in its best interests. But by having the relationship modifier or value, I should say, in Dominus Galaxia be representative of how each empire as a whole feels about each other, we sort of can free ourselves from that abstraction and do some cool things. Like, for example, if you have a higher relationship with an enemy or with another empire, Dominus Galaxia, like you're attacking their enemies, you have a trade treaty, you have an alliance, neither of you are really spying on one another or blowing up each other's ships in little border skirmishes, then you will have a higher yield rate on your trade and research treaties. but at the same time, you become more vulnerable to one another's spies. And if you have a low relationship value, the opposite happens. And based on that, then the idea is that you can have a more liberated AI that instead of just saying, I'm supposed to like this person because the relationship value tells me to, can think, well, my empire likes this person. They aren't spying on me, and I'm getting a good yield on my treaty. So I'm gonna stay in these guys' good graces. And you're sort of have the AI, hopefully, and to be fair, it's not quite there yet in Dominus Galaxia. It does use it as a little bit of a how do I feel about this person value more than it maybe should at the moment, but the ideal is that the AI is reacting to the effects of that relationship, not the relationship itself, at least at the higher difficulty levels when it's less important for it to roleplay. But in any case, the espionage or the spying system for Dominus Galaxia is basically you can put spies into an enemy empire through spending. You don't but you're talking about thousands of spies, not just one or two spies that you make in a turn. And you can also set defensive goals in terms of allocating towards prevention to basically harden your systems and detection so that you can better trace who is responsible for the various going-ons that are happening in your empire through other spies. Now, with the spying system, these spies that you have, they can be geared towards espionage or sabotage. And every once in a while, they'll come up to you and say, hey, there's this mission that we can go on. And then you set various parameters to basically tell them what's important, what they should focus on. You can add some stimulus to have the mission complete faster. You can decide whether you want them to be more stealthy, harder to detect, or whether you want them to more focus on getting the job done at any cost. You can decide if you want to try and frame another empire, or if you do that, everything becomes a little bit more difficult, but there's a chance that you can frame somebody else at the end and maybe hurt their relationships with other empires. And then you send that off, and then you wait a certain amount of turns. It's actually somewhat random turns, so it might be between 4 and 8, and eventually you get a report back, or they get caught, or stuff like that. But right now, it's a little bit too much of a black box because it's something that I've very recently, very quickly put in. But the system itself is very flexible. So even though there's only really 2 different missions right now, which is blow stuff up or steal technology, I can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So internally, the way that the spy ops work is that you have various different options that you can pick. So steal technology is a spy op, and then you have categories like propulsion or construction weapons, etc. But theoretically, I could make a different spy op and then have categories that have very little to do with one another and could be more like a multiple choice, pick your poison. Which way should we go? Do we want to try and steal plans for this ship to make it so that we have our weapons do more damage against its design? Or do we want to try and blow up the shipyard that we've infiltrated and that sort of stuff? So there's a lot of different things that I can do. Everything's basically not very hard coded. It's all sort of based on a whole bunch of delegates. And going forward, I hope that I can do lots of sort of unique, interesting stuff, even though right now it is a bit more bare bones.
Well, it's still,
sounds awesome.
It sounds awesome.
It does sound awesome.
It hopefully will be more awesome in the future. Right now, I'm not totally satisfied with it, though.
Right, but you're calling it a beta, but is this actually a beta or is it an alpha?
It's a beta. I've been doing this for about 4.5 years. It's a beta.
So going back in the history a little bit, you merged with That was the other game. Beyond.
Beyond Bayon. Beyond. Is that like Duran?
Yes. I couldn't. I always that second word always throws me. Beyond Bayon. And so it's, what's his name? Is it Brent
Patterson.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Are you working with him on this?
Yes, I am.
That's great.
Basically, I started doing my own going back to the beginning, actually.
Yeah.
Before I started work on my own 4X game, I was interacting with Brent a little bit through his blog for his Beyond Bayon game, and I'm basically being an annoying person saying, you should do this design and this design and this design because these are cool designs. Don't follow make my game for me, right? Eventually, a number of years later, I ended up leaving my job because I'd saved up a whole bunch of money, and I decided I think I just turned 30 or something, and I decided, you know what, I turned 28, but 30 was on the horizon, and I was thinking, I don't want to dispatch ambulances for the rest of my life. I need something that's more intellectually and creatively fulfilling. So I quit my job, started learning the Unity engine. I did a little bit of computer science in college, but some of that stuck. So a lot of stuff I had to relearn. A lot of stuff I had to learn for the first time. And I eventually said, why don't I do a 4X game, which was a terrible idea because 4X games are super difficult, and I'm lucky that I've gotten as far as I have. But I worked a little bit on a 4X, my own 4X game, sort of similar to Master of Orion. I randomly was like, oh yeah, I remember that Brent dude. I'm going to show off my game to him. And he's like, this is great. This looks so great. We should merge our efforts with your graphics and my stuff. Then we can take over the world. Of course, actually at this point, the game was totally ugly, but Beyond Bayon was never a good looking game either, even if it was kind of had its own rustic charm. So, I said, yeah, sure. And that was that. And then we started working on it. And over time, Brent has taken on more of a background role, just more real life stuff. So it's not a fully solo project, but at the moment I'd say that I'm something like 90% of the development effort. But it's also possible that Brent might one day, decide that he can spend a bit more time on it, and that'd be cool as well. But yeah, that's sort of how it came to be.
That's kind of an awesome story. I've been talking to Brent for years. I wish I could have him on the podcast, but guy's deaf.
Yep, that makes it a little bit more difficult.
I'm sure. So you've been working on this one for how long now?
I think about 4.5 years.
Oh, okay. So that was
long time. Too long. I could have made like 3 mobile games by now. I should have, financially speaking. But yeah. But the other thing is, I want to release this hopefully pretty soon. The Kickstarter says September 2021, but I'm aiming for before the end of 2020.
Oh.
The reason I do that is because software engineering, it's kind of famous that it's difficult to make projection targets. And the error bars always end up running in the worst direction, which is it ends up taking much longer than you thought it would. So the 2021 of September, it's more of an attempt to bake in that goal or to bake in those error bars. To try and be honest, I don't want to accidentally mislead people, even if I don't intend to. And for me, I just figured that's a little bit more moral than trying to, give a more liberal estimate of what is going to be done. Also, sorry, that was a tangent. What I was going to say is that to the extent that I can continue getting support from the game, making it a long seller, and at least having enough to pay my living expenses from sales, I'd like to support the game for a long time. I wouldn't mind just working on it for 4 years after I'm done, just improving it. It's a little bit of a intellectual exercise that I do sometimes. What if Kerberos had just kept making sort of the stars better? What would have happened there? It might have worked out. I've contacted Kerberos, who's a little bit more skeptical. I also should say that Kerberos actually plugged Dominus Galaxia on their forums.
That's
and
great.
Donated at the $185 tier.
Wow.
So,
wow. That's awesome. We've actually
Sword of the Stars is one of my favorite games. If you're listening and you haven't played it, it's like $10 on Steam, I think.
Oh,
for the
God.
complete edition. Play it now.
Get the complete edition is one of the finest 4X games you could possibly own.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, we've had them on the show like twice because we had them on to talk about Sword of the Stars.
Yeah.
But we also had them on to talk about Homeworld Cataclysm, which is
also a great game.
Yeah.
Well, somewhat there.
Yeah, it's not mostly theirs. Like, it was published by someone else, but it was mostly there.
Well, the guys from Kerberos broke off from Barking Dog Studios, and some of the guys who worked on Cataclysm all studios. So it's sort of like, Parallax breaking off into Volition and Outrage. So you could say that Volition made Descent, and to a certain extent, it's true.
That's true. That's a good point. But yeah, we're all still upset about Sword of the Stars too. I think that's something we're all just because.
Well, it could have been a great game too.
Oh, it could have been. It could have been. You play it, and you're like,
there are a few things that went wrong.
Quite a few.
Well, for me, I think maybe what might have saved it is if they wouldn't have tried to make it multiplayer right away. Because I'm sure that a lot of effort went into that. And if 20% of their effort went into multiplayer, and that 20% of their effort could have went into, making the game good, then you could have done the multiplayer afterwards after you got sales. And if you don't make the game good, then nobody's going to play it in multiplayer in the first place.
Oh God, I know.
That said, maybe I should. I'm not going to practice what I preach because I'd like to do multiplayer for Dominus Galaxia by launch. I can't promise it. It might be after launch. It might be after version 1.0, but it already has hot seat, and that's at least. And it's sort of coded with multiplayer in mind for the same reason. So there's a foundation there. And this is probably going to be technical. But one thing that I'm planning to do also is to refactor a lot of the turn processing. Right now it's very linear. So it's kind of like Empire 1 or Empire 0, which would be the human in most cases, takes their turn, hits end turn. Then the AI for Empire 1 executes their turn, and then Empire 2 executes theirs, etc. But what I want to do is have everybody take their turn at the same time. And I need to be careful when I say this, because there's a lot of games out there. Civilization and multiplayer, Age of Wonders has a game mode that does this. And Endless Space does this for what I think is not I can't fathom why they do it. But you have a lot of games where everybody's moving at the same time, right? So I can move a unit and then I see another in my turn-based game. And to me, that makes sense when you have hexes, because either you go sequential and then you're waiting forever for other people to move, or you try and do something so that if you have a movement phase, that you can actually intercept one another on a hex grid, but it's all messy. But if you're doing point-to-point movement, like in Master of Orion or Endless Space or Stellaris, then it doesn't make any sense to me why you don't just have a dedicated movement phase. It's worked in the past. It doesn't violate the principle of having a turn-based game or anything. And so I just want to be clear that when I'm talking about everybody taking the same time, I'm not talking about seeing somebody's ships move when you're taking your turn. I'm talking about everybody issues their orders all at once. When everybody is finished with their turn, then everything gets resolved, and then all the units move. So a very strong order of operations.
It's a WeGo system, pretty much.
Right. Why didn't I think of saying that? Yes, exactly. And to go along with that, if I do that, I might try to encapsulate certain things a little bit more robustly. So like instead of also instead of just having a dedicated movement phase, maybe there's also a dedicated diplomacy phase where everybody interacts with one another. And if you do that, then you sort of keep the different instances where of the empires doing their things basically completely separate from one another, so that you have less opportunity for little bugs to arise from timing issues and race conditions when those empires are interacting with each other. The idea is they are only interacting with each other during the turn processing, not while they're taking their turn, if that makes sense.
So it might be a more phased sort of thing where you have the movement phase, diplomacy phase,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
those resolve in a WeGo type of thing.
Yeah, I may or may not do a diplomacy. But
well, in that vein of stuff that would be going on in the background, rather than just the active.
Yeah, so basically more of a client server, and I also want to be careful of the way that I say that, because the single player for Dominus Galaxia, it's never going to require an internet connection, never going to have DRM. I can make that promise. But internally, a client server type thing where the server is basically holding the true state of the game, and then sort of distributes that state at the start of the turn to all the different empires. They make the orders and submit those to the server, which then consolidates everything and does turn processing. At least that would be the idea. And if I can have that very well encapsulated, then it's not necessarily as complicated to implement as you might think it would, and it would be very easy to multi-thread and have everything going in the background. So, and by extension, plus with the work done with Hot Seat, very easy to have network multiplayer.
Right. And that's going to be a big deal for a lot of people, because it always amazes me when I look on a forum for like a single player game and a million people are like, why no multiplayer? Multiplayer question mark? It's like, you kind of have to do multiplayer in this day and age if you're going to do it right. Like, don't half-ass it at least. But it doesn't sound like you're half-assing it. That's what I'm just saying.
Yep.
It's got to be done right. Don't sacrifice. Don't, like you were saying earlier, don't sacrifice the core gameplay just because you want some multiplayer in there.
Yeah, and that's sort of the way that I'm looking at it. Is it's almost like killing two birds with one stone. So if I do this refactoring on turn processing, it makes networked multiplayer very easy. At least assuming, maybe the version of network multiplayer doesn't have tactical battles, because that's something where a lot of communication needs to happen. But besides making that network multiplayer really easy, it also makes the turns really fast, makes the game more robust, makes it more difficult to introduce bugs. And there's a lot of good reasons to have a very concrete order of operations that everything happens in.
Yeah, and not a lot of 4X games use a phased system like that. So that would also...
I think Stars is probably the game with the most stringent order of operations.
Yeah. God, I miss that game.
That's a classic.
I might steal some of the concepts from Stars still in Dominus Galaxia, like Metal.
There's nothing wrong with that. Stars had...
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Stars, Master of Orion 1, and Sword of the Stars. Oh. Those games are sort of in their own little category, and then there's Dominus Galaxia that's trying to. The idea is that Dominus Galaxia is basically going to be the fourth game here.
Well, I'm still sad that the sequel to Stars never got realized. I don't know. I think that they tried to find a publisher but couldn't, which is just flabbergasting. There is such a huge market for that. That's classic, and the design is so great. Well, it was going to be what was it going to be? Empire Interactive, if I recall correctly. But
never heard of them.
Oh yeah, they published a lot of flight sims back in the day from Rowan and whatnot. But they also published some games like Ghostmaster and things like that. And but by the time Stars was coming out, they were kind of floundering. I got to see it at E3 back in the day. I actually have the beta on a disc somewhere, but it will not run. But I was blown away by how good it looked. Like, not just it looked good because, especially
now
compared.
Now you're making me very depressed.
I'm still depressed about it. I'm still depressed about it because I wanted this game.
Sometimes there's just things that little white lies that you need. Like,
it was garbage. It looked worse than the original game, which already looked pretty bad because that was Windows 3.1 up the yin yang. And
I mean, that said, Sword of the Stars 2 looked really awesome before it released as well. Like I was super hyped for that game.
I got to tell you, you are entering a very strange, pardon the word, space.
Yeah.
Because the 4X space, especially the Space 4X space, is a very strange place for gamers. Because like everyone wants to be just about everyone wants to be Master of Orion 2. Everybody wants to be Master of Orion, the next Master of Orion 2, but no one can be the next Master of Orion 2.
I have a theory on that.
Oh, please, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so I think what, and I think this is part of it, but everybody says, you can't be Master of Orion 2 wearing these rose-colored glasses, and even if you make a better game, nobody's going to think it's better. But I think that's actually not quite the case, and I guess Numu is a good case study in this.
What's a good case? What's a good case study?
I just Conquer the Stars. I just call it Numu. I refuse to call it Master of Orion. There's already a Master of Orion. That's yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
And it's one of my favorite games. But so the way that I look at Master of Orion 2 is I don't think it's a designed in ways. Or at the very least, it's a regression from Master of Orion 1 in a lot of ways in terms of the design. There are some things that are absolutely weird, like having a ship designer that is nested inside of the solar system view, then the colony screen, then the build queue. But that's pretty minor. But the entire build queue system is bad. It's gets tiring really fast, and it's almost completely thoughtless. You just have a very specific build that you do. The research system is better than Civilization, I think, but it's still not as good as Master of Orion 1 or Sword of the Stars.
Yeah, agreed.
The combat is amazing when you first start out, and then it completely breaks by the late game.
Oh my god, it gets so... Even by the mid game, you're like, oh god, I'm just going to auto-resolve everything. The early game is amazing, the mid game is not good, and the late game is completely broken. And I mean, that's a lot of that is what Master of Orion 2 is. Sending population to different worlds is really difficult. The way that the economy works is probably worse than Master of Orion 1. But here's the thing: like, even though I dislike a lot of Master of Orion's design, the game feels great to play. It draws you into its universe, and it's immersive as heck, and it's just plain fun. And a lot of that, I think, is due to a lot of it's due to the presentation. A lot of it is just all these millions of different intangibles that's coming together. Like in Master of Orion 1 and 2, when just even the music design, when you hear that music when the breakthrough happens, it's almost Pavlovian. Yeah. You start salivating because you know that a new tech is coming and it's going to be awesome. It's so triumphant, that music. It's so all right. It's so
And Master of Orion 2 is just oozing with style. And what I think ends up happening is we end up being biased. Humans reason in more talk fashion. So I'm going to try and actually find this really quick, but there was like the psychological study that was done on split brain patients back in the day. And I think I can find this quickly. Hopefully. It's basically just sort of proving the way that humans think about things. Okay, so here we are. I'm just going to read this verbatim. We showed a split-brain patient 2 pictures. A chicken claw was shown to his right visual field so that the left hemisphere only saw the claw picture, and a snow scene was shown to the left visual field so the right hemisphere saw only that. He was then asked to choose a picture from an array of pictures placed in full view in front of him, which both hemispheres could see. The left hand pointed to a shovel, which was the most appropriate answer for the snow scene. The right hand pointed to a chicken, which was the most appropriate answer for the chicken claw. Then we asked him why he chose those items. His left hemisphere speech center replied, "Oh, that's simple. The chicken claw goes with the chicken," easily explaining what it knew. It had seen the chicken claw. Then, what was interesting was that the left hemisphere did not, Then, looking down at his left hand pointing to the shovel, without missing a beat, he said, "And you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed." Immediately, the left brain, observing the left hand's response without the knowledge of why it had picked that item, put it into a context that would explain it. And that's very interesting from a psychological point of view, which is basically saying that we have these impulses in our that basically make our mind up about things, and then we rationalize them after the fact, post hoc. And that's probably a lot of why we're so politically divided, and why even smart people can believe really dumb things. Like there were a lot of really smart Nazis, is that we believe things based on, say, an emotional response to something, and then we rationalize why we believe it after the fact. And this is a giant tangent already, but I think the same thing happens with game design, where you have this awesome immersive experience like Master of Orion 2, and that's just oozing with style, and it's engaging you on a psychological and a narrative level, and you're placing yourself in this game world, and you think, I'm having so much fun, and your sort of interpretive center of your brain then thinks, because this design is great, and because all of these things are working good, and that, at the very least, you are biased towards thinking that these designs in this game that you enjoy are really good. And the same thing is true if you have a really designed game that looks like stars. It's more difficult to see what's happening as something that's really fun and good and well designed. So I think that's what a lot of people that are trying to remake Master of Orion 2 are missing from Master of Orion 2. They're trying to remake the mechanics, and they're doing it with much worse presentation, where it was actually the presentation more than anything that I think made that game. With the new Master of Orion game, Conquer the Stars, and, well, there was a couple issues. The first issue is that in a lot of ways they regressed from what Master of Orion 2 was in terms of the gameplay. They somehow, for some reason, used a Civilization-style tech tree and movement system, and both of those made the game worse. Removing a fuel range and the star lanes, none of that really helped. And the combat, while it didn't have the issues with the late game, was just sort of not very interesting. But the bigger issue was that even though, it was technically apt, it just didn't have that same sense of style and atmosphere, and it just didn't have the same presentation that Master of Orion 2 did. The third thing that sunk it was that because it was so close to Master of Orion 2, it was easy to compare the two. And in that comparison, the game didn't hold up that well.
Yeah.
So I think that they would have been perfectly fine if they would have had a better game that was in the vein of Master of Orion 2, or if they had a game that was as good as similar to Master of Orion 2 and less easy to compare to. But they sort of got caught up in the middle where they weren't as good and they were easy to compare. And that's sort of, I think, what sunk that game.
The worst of both worlds, so to speak.
So to speak, yeah. Or the perfect storm.
Yeah, I'm still upset about that new move because I think it did some things right. Like, I think it's a good beginner 4X.
It improved the colony management.
Yeah,
for Master of Orion 2. But again, like in Master of Orion 2, you go down, you view the colony, and you have this awesome landscape, and you can see all of your buildings, and that's really cool. And the new Master of Orion didn't really give you that feeling of, I guess you could say, planetary personhood that Master of Orion 2 did back in the day.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, in terms of the systems, it's much better what they did versus that terrible build queue in Master of Orion 2.
Yeah, I didn't like that queue either. But I don't know.
Nobody did.
Yeah. It's just a shame because I think the new Moo got a decent amount right, but like it's a good, like I was saying, it's a good beginner 4X, I think. Like it's a good stepping stone.
Yeah.
To
the messaging on it was kind of a bit weird to begin with, because it was sending like it didn't know if it wanted to be Master of Orion or Master of Orion 2 at the beginning.
Yeah.
And well, some people say that Master of Orion 1 looks cartoony. I don't think it looks that cartoony.
Oh, really?
In fact, I don't think it really looks that cartoony at all. I think it's more of a factor of just, you know, the graphics at the time.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, that was interesting how they sort of were going for the Master of Orion 2 in practice, but Master of Orion 1 in like the spirit of the style didn't make the most sense.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I had more fun with Master of Magic than Master of Orion 2. To be honest with you.
Well, Master of Magic is fascinating in itself because it's basically a halfway stepping stone between Moo and 2. In a lot of ways, at least.
Yeah, it's such a weird, unbalanced sandbox where you could like almost destroy the world, and it's great.
And
what was literally destroy it?
What was that last spell called? The spell of power? No, that, you know, sort of the tech victory was done well too, where you can sort of gang up on the person before he unleashes that. The interesting thing about Master of Magic, I think, was they ended up copying a lot of systems for Master of Orion 1, but then they ended up creating a lot of bugs on the Realms Beyond forums for Master of Magic. Just navigating here. The Caster of Magic project?
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that's doing that survey has this things like a comparison between Caster of Magic, Master of Magic. Caster of Magic's basically just I think it's not a reverse engineered or a source port. I think it's just sort of he's modifying the binary and the data files. But he has he has a list of all these different issues in terms of Master of Magic, of things that got broken from Master of Orion 1. So there's certain diplomatic stuff that just is supposed to be possible that's impossible in Master of Magic, for example. But that's just an interesting divergence. I'll try and find a link to that. But yeah,
I've never actually played Caster of Magic, but I have heard of it.
I haven't played it either.
I should play it.
It's on the list. I'm very busy at the moment.
Well, sure. I should play it because Master of Magic is so good.
Mm-hmm.
People have tried to get that particular use the phrase magic in all the remake. Yeah, I was a background.
But the thing is, there are a few games that have actually, I think, captured Master of Magic pretty well. Like Age of Wonders, I think, is the closest thing we've gotten.
Agreed.
Like even Planetfall is very Master of Magic-y, even though it's sci-fi. But back to your game. So you were talking earlier.
Sure.
You were talking earlier about how it's easy to change all these variables. Does that mean modding is a possibility?
Modding is a possibility, actually. A lot of stuff is exposed in plain text files, actually, and more stuff will probably be exposed in the future. So you can create new buildings, new technologies, new special devices, new weapons. You can modify the miniaturization curves, the cost for buildings. You can make it so that factories, for example, don't increase cost linearly, but every increased cost with every sort of 100 or with every robotic control like Master of Orion 1 does. So theoretically, you can probably, just with the data files, do something that's a lot more Mu 1-like than Dominus Galaxia is. And I'm pretty sure somebody's going to try and do that eventually. So that'll be interesting to see.
Of course they will, because Mu 1 is such a classic. So someone's going to do that. Absolutely. That is awesome. So I'm trying to think of other questions. So right now you're on itch.io and you're going to be on Steam.
Yes.
That is the plan.
Yeah, that's something I'm working out with Valve at the moment. It's an entire thing. So I'm on itch.io and sort of like the idea is sort of how to say this diplomatically. I'm trying to do a Kickstarter in a more moral way, I guess. Like I'm not. There are exceptions, I think, but in general, I'm not a very big fan of going hand in hand with just like a little bit of concept art or a vertical slice, especially for something as complex as a 4X game.
Right.
And to be fair, until you've tried to make a 4X game, you have no idea how complex they actually are to make. So a lot of it probably is naivety, but it's no surprise, it's no secret that the 4X games have not had a good run at it at Kickstarter, and I think the people there are fairly skeptical and jaded of new efforts now, and for a good reason.
Yeah,
I can't even actually really think of anything that I'd say that's a resounding success. Star Drive might be the closest one, although there was a little bit of drama there after the release.
Oh, but, was there ever? Yeah. Oh my God!
But the game got done, and it's a pretty good game, and the black box mod makes it really a lot better as well. And say what you will about Danny, it's like the fact that he can do that much work that fast on his own is nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I mean, if you backed I'd much rather back Star Drive than having backed more, for example. I think Dan gets Dan gets a little bit of a bad rap personally. But
I mean, it's not 100%. But
I mean, full disclosures, I do talk with Dan sometimes, so
it's not wholly undeserved at the same time. But more is another. I think was it Predestination had a fairly successible Kickstarter.
They had a fairly successful Kickstarter. Yeah, I haven't. Again, I want to be careful talking about other games.
That's fair.
But
well, I don't have to.
Fair enough. But just in terms of the screenshots. How to put this? It's Dominus Galaxia has a rustic charm, and it could look better. True. But
fair.
Yeah, Predestination. It looks like I don't know. Maybe they can one day sort of do something with the UI because it doesn't look very. It looks kind of.
It's all right. It's a fun game, but the UI.
I'm struggling to be diplomatic here.
No, the UI could be better. I mean, it's a fun game. I enjoyed my time with it, but yeah, I mean. It's one of the like. There has been such a glut of Space 4X over the last 3 years.
I'll put it one way, right? So Predestination wasn't a failure, but it's not a glowing success story either.
That's
it's
true.
Not like it's not an FTL. It's not something that stands apart as an exemplar. For this is what Space 4X games can do. We don't have that exemplar yet. Worlds of Magic was disappointing. More was disappointing. Man. Lords of Fragile failed. There was a great game. There was a great campaign. It was something like Slower Than Light.
Oh,
where
God.
The idea,
Yeah. I backed that one. That was like
I didn't know about it. I totally would have if I had seen it. But the fact that failed just tore me to shreds because I've actually had the same idea, and I think it's just has so much strategic potential in there. The communications delay thing, especially if you can have your own physical presence in the universe and your flagship and move it around to be closer to battles and stuff. And it's all. Sorry, I'm going way too fast now, but it's like fine. The perfect solution to micromanagement if you do it correctly. Because if your message takes a certain amount of time to get to the far reaches of your domain, then by the time it gets there, it's not really that pertinent and might be doing more harm than good. So you need to delegate, and that opens up like this entire huge smorgasbord of awesome strategic stuff where you need to choose the people that you put there that are where you have tension between trustworthiness and ability, and you can do stuff like jam the transmissions from a battle so that people don't know what's happening. You can send out battle fleets and only find out if they're successful after the fact, or you can lead them yourself but put yourself at risk. Oh, it's just such a ripe ground to have gameplay with. And that guy's game looked so cool. He like raised barely anything, didn't he? Sorry, phone.
That's okay. We had them on the podcast back in the day.
Oh yeah, I would love to do a podcast with that person, because I think I thought about that game after he did it, but I didn't know about it yet, and found out about it just fairly recently, and I thought, oh my goodness, this guy did the game, one of the games that I want to do, but he wasn't able to make it work. And that guy should have gotten like $100,000 worth of funding. A couple of years earlier, he probably would have.
It's not a 4X specifically, but it's kind of XCOM-y, but in Earth orbit, and it kind of reminds me of Slower Than Light, but I cannot. Was it Remnant?
Is it the Long War mod guys?
No. Is it Remnant?
Invictus?
Do you guys remember
that rings a bell?
Spaz, you're a hunter. Do you guys remember that one?
Not offhand.
Yeah, my brain's not. Nope.
I can't remember.
Remnant from the Ashes?
No. That's not it. No, that's not it. But there is a game. It was Kickstarted and it was successful, I believe, where it's kind of XCOM-y with some 4X-y in it, but it's in Earth orbit, and there's actual fighter combat in it. It looks. I cannot, for the life of me, remember the bloody name. Oh God, it'll come to me at 4 a.m. That's when it'll come to me. But anyway, I feel for you, because one, you're entering a very crowded space. Two, you're entering a space that is pretty. I don't know if people are burnt out on 4Xs, but there were a lot of 4Xs over the last few years, and not all of them were great. I mean, only a few of them were great.
Most of them weren't.
Yeah, a lot of them weren't.
I only think that there's like 3 great 4X games.
Yeah. In the past few years,
those are Star Civilization and Master. But I'm like.
Well, I mean,
that's admittedly an extreme view.
Those are the cream of the crop. But I'm talking over the last few years, there were some really good ones, but there were also a lot of, mostly forgettable ones. Yeah, and it's
Brian. Were you thinking of Interstellar Prime?
Oh, Interstellar Space Genesis. Yeah, no.
That's
Interstellar Prime is the one I was mentioning.
Oh,
because that was Kickstarted. It was successful.
Yeah, maybe? ISG wasn't, but as far as a Master of Orion 2 type game goes, I haven't played Sword Stars and Shadows yet, but I really liked what the ISG guys did with colony management.
Yeah, I really did too.
So here's sort of the issue, I think, with the Mu 1 Dominus Galaxia slider-based stuff, is that, colony management or city management 4X games, you might even say all 4X games to date, isn't very strategic or strategic at all. It's almost a purely internal optimization problem. But if you take it out of the game, then the game doesn't feel like it has meat. It sort of tricks you into thinking that there's strategic depth where there isn't. But with most of the implementations out there, they end up scaling really terrible, and 4X games are all about scaling out. So you end up with Master of Orion 2, and it's interesting when you have 3 colonies, and when you have 30, it's just hell. At the same time, when you only have 2 or 3 colonies in Master of Orion 2, that's a lot interesting when you only have 2 or 3 colonies in Master of Orion 1. And it just is. And again, that's the beauty of Master of Orion 2, is it draws you into the world. Everything feels more concrete, and you feel like you're part of this living, breathing thing. But so the issue with streamlined colony management is the opposite. It's not very interesting, even though it scales really well. And the guys with ISG, I don't think it's a very strategic system. I don't think any colony management system yet done is very strategic. Stars might come kind of close with the metal. That might be the best one. But they did a great job sort of threading the needle between scaling well and being narratively and conceptually interesting and fun to click on things. And probably a better job than Dominus Galaxia, which goes extremely in the other direction of just make everything as efficient and scale as well as possible. Now, my white whale is sort of to try and make a colony management system that does have strategic depth, that does have sort of these external influences to it. And I have some ideas there, but nothing quite yet that I'm ready to share. But if I have enough funding and I have enough time to do it, it's something that I'd like to explore, probably as an optional mode, since I know a lot of Master of Orion 1 fans will sort of like the Master of Orion 1 style colony management, but it's something I certainly want to try one day.
Oh, that's totally fair. By the way, the game was Remnant.
Yes, you just posted a link in our channel. I remember this now.
Yes. So that's the closest thing I could think of to Slower Than Light, which I also am crushingly upset didn't make it.
And this Remnant Kickstarter looks great, let's see. They only raised $6,400 around Canadian dollars. You probably see it in American dollars. I'm Canadian, so I see it in. But
right.
Like in 2015, this $150,000 project.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty easily.
He says
it looks better than More does.
Yeah,
or its campaign looks much better than.
I'm still upset about More.
Raised a ton of money,
and it's dead, right? Isn't it dead? I think it's dead.
As far as I'm aware, it's totally dead.
Yeah.
The main person ended up getting a whole bunch of outside funding, but then that dried up and he just couldn't continue, I think.
Yeah, that always pisses me off when that happens.
Well, what gets me, again, I've sort of, maybe I should try and be more diplomatic, but despite the fact that everybody's so jaded and skeptical, it seems like a lot of people are making the same mistakes. Did you see the Day of Dragons Kickstarter recently?
The what? No. Day of Dragons?
Day of Dragons. Yeah. It's an Unreal that got randomly covered by a YouTuber with a whole bunch of subscribers, and then raised $500,000.
Oh my god!
And they don't even have a pitch video.
Oh my god! I see it.
Kind of.
There's a website. So I hate to call this out because again, they've raised $500,000. They could literally hire a team and make this game. This game might come out and it might be awesome. It's entirely possible. But if you look at, there's like a webpage that sort of goes over it, and like they even, I think there might be some evidence that they stole some other art.
Oh no!
Well, most of it's asset flip, but like they repurpose somebody else's like promotional image or something, like, and I think they might have banned some people as well from their Reddits, but there's a whole bunch of red flags, but they raised a lot of money based on sort of the typical thing that everybody has become jaded about, which is coming into Kickstarter with only this very thinnest of vertical slices, or basically, sort of like the cardboard. There's a specific word for it that I forget, but like a cardboard set or a cardboard town, like that episode of Star Trek, but
or blazing saddles.
Yeah, but. It's a little bit interesting that everybody seems super jaded because of these things that have happened in the past that had the same red flags, but you do a project nowadays, and if you make a lot of, you try and hype it up and make a lot of, promises that, and I also think there's something about being more abstract, where the more abstract you are, the more that players can sort of think of what their version of what they want to see is and place it in there.
Yeah.
Probably helps a little bit with the crowdfunding. But yeah, that was interesting to see lately.
Like it's still, that amazes me. Like I'm still amazed Elite got made, because I don't know if you
Elite,
remember.
oh,
I don't know if you remember their Kickstarter.
Elite
but
Dangerous.
It was crap. Their Kickstarter.
I don't remember the Kickstarter. I bought it afterwards.
Oh, the Kickstarter was garbage. They didn't have a video. They barely had any images. It was garbage. It was utter garbage. And yet somehow that damn thing got made. I kind of wish it hadn't, but whatever.
No, you don't like it?
It's such an empty experience. Like at first when you're like, oh my God, I'm in a ship. This looks amazing. And then you start getting money and you start getting other ships. Like, okay, what else is there to do? Get more money at another ship? Oh, okay. Like,
isn't that sort of par for the course for Elite though?
It doesn't have to be. In 1984 maybe, but in 2014 there's so much. I don't know. Like after things like.
But hey, they shipped a game, and
this is true. And they're
they obviously I don't know. I think that's I don't have any problems with the Elite Dangerous campaign. Maybe they could have done it better, but again, like it was a different time back then. You could put up a campaign without a pitch video, and you could get a whole bunch of money from it.
It was like
nowadays it's pretty hard.
I think Star Citizen hadn't even finished yet when they launched their campaign. Well, finished their Kickstarter.
That probably didn't help them.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, but like, so you have such a struggle, and I feel for you, man. That's why we're happy to help by having you on the show. Hopefully that'll get some more eyes.
Well, thanks. I mean, at the same time, I feel a little bit self-conscious, like if I'm just sort of bitching about it, because chances are, just looking at the projections, the chances are that I do reach my pledge amount. That I need, but it's certainly not a for surefire thing, and I was sort of hoping that I'd have a little bit more by now. But
no, it's totally
the hard thing is visibility. I kind of suspected before I started it that I was going to end up getting a lot of small pledges, and that everybody would be asking me to remake the game and it sort of ended up being the opposite, where I don't have very many pledges. I'm just a bit over 200. But I have a number of people like pledging at the $85, $185, $250 tiers. So more of that than I was expecting, and everybody's super excited, and everybody seems to be enjoying the game on itch. At least the people that are commenting. There's probably some amount of reporter bias there, but I'm glad for that. But yeah, it's still sort of.
Well, if you're getting more,
I still, I'm struggling to get the visibility up there.
Oh, well, that
actually brings me to this actually started off as a tangent. I'm on Edge going on Steam. So right now I'm in a little bit of a kerfuffle, I guess, with Valve.
What?
Because on itch, basically it's almost a full game. It's the beta. It's non-restricted. It's the same thing that I'm playing. I'm not holding anything back. It's just a few rough edges. But there's a button that says, "Hey, check out our Kickstarter." And when you exit, there's a splash screen that says, "By the way, you can back us on Kickstarter if you want, or not. Just exit." But apparently this is verboten on Steam.
What?
Yeah. I've actually seen other games do it in the past. Overload, the Parallax guys.
Yeah.
Their playable teaser had both I believe, both the splash screen and the button.
It totally did.
That was 2016. Totally did. Now, of course, the ironic thing is that if I were more paranoid and had just submitted my build without that and then added it after the fact, nobody would have noticed. But now that it leaves me in a bit of a situation, because I can put it on Steam, and I'm sure it'll get a lot of traction on Steam. It's basically the storefront's approved. I'm just waiting for the build approval and going back and forth on whether they'll let me put that version up. If I put it up there, I have a feeling that thousands of people will play it, maybe tens of thousands, and there's no way to communicate really that there's a Kickstarter going on. And I was told just recently, you can put it up on your community page that you have a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, okay, if I roll a 100-sided die and they just happen to check the community page,
live the natural 100.
Yeah, if you post an announcement,
that'll be goes up on the page.
Yeah,
and they can see that. Yeah, they can definitely see that.
That might help then. Actually, I'd actually. So I'll do a bit of a mea culpa there and say maybe that wasn't such a extreme idea that they had as I thought it was at the time. And I've been thinking, I'm sort of still waiting to hear back. I doubt that they'll change their mind on it, but I'm trying to think of ways to sort of not violate that rule. It's like the exact rule I think they're saying is you can't have what was it? Can't have like a message. I'm gonna just do this. Not the exact same thing that they're saying, but you basically can't have like asking for support or whatever. So I might try and do something like, hey, by the way, we have a big news item. Head on to our forum or onto our Discord, and
that might
and ask about it or something like that. But that's a little bit disappointing. Difficult it is to get the visibility and how much I need. And on top of that, you need to pay the Steam submission fee even for a free game, which is interesting. So if you have Battle for Westnod on Steam for everybody to enjoy, you need to pay $100. For a paid game, after you make $1,000, they give you that deposit back. But for a free game, you can never make the deposit back.
Yeah, I know there's good reason for that, though. The reason why they do that,
it's gatekeeping. Otherwise, you get loaded with crap.
Cards and achievements, because the aftermarket for cards, you can make money off of the cards without actually having anything put into the game itself.
Well, what I separately suggested, because I don't think it's fair that people like Battle for Westnod have to pay Steam money to put their awesome game on their platform, which will benefit the platform. And I don't know if anybody will listen, but what I suggested is the $100 fee still makes sense for free games as a gatekeeping function. But there should be some way, if a paid game can get their $100 back, a free game that you're giving out of the goodness of your heart should too. So maybe that's after you have a certain amount of reviews or a certain amount of people playing it or downloads. But ideally, there'd be some sort of different metric that they used for the free ones, especially those open source things that are completely free. Like my thing that's advertising my game, like that makes actually more sense that you'd charge me $100 because I'm getting something out of it. But the Battle for Westnoth guys or Vegas Strike, whatever free game that you want to put out there, something just seems a little bit off.
Well, Steam is a weird platform. I mean, we all have to use it, and we wish it was better. But I feel for any developer who gets on Steam, because visibility, like you were saying, is just a nightmare. It's just an absolute nightmare, and they don't care. The
good thing is you only need to go viral.
Huh?
The good thing is you only need to go viral.
Oh, once. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, but I can't imagine it's easy to get to that point.
It's hard to say. I mean, maybe some people know how to crack the code, but it's possible it could happen with Dominus Galaxia in the next few days. It's hard to say. You just need the right or the right post.
Well, you're updating you're sending out relatively regular updates to the Kickstarter, which is good, and
and updating the build as well.
Exactly.
And it's nice to have so many testers. Like my the game Discord is more busy than it's ever been. People are talking all the time. I have over 100 people on there now. So
wow,
and a lot of them came from the Kickstarter. And that's awesome. Like, even if the
That is
Kickstarter
great.
ends up failing and it's not a complete loss, it's because it's definitely
At that
improved
point, you
my
got a community.
visibility and
Yeah.
has built a community around it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you could try again in 6 months with a 30-day Kickstarter.
Yeah, we'll see. I need to find some way to survive until then.
Or maybe 3 months. I don't know, but you don't want to try right away. I don't think, but
Hard to say. I think I would need to.
yeah.
At that point, I might be more desperately searching for a publisher because of the time frame.
Fair. That's totally fair. And there's some great publishers out there. No question, like Iceberg and whatnot. A lot of great little publishers out there. So, folks, the game is. We should probably wrap up. The game is Dominus Galaxia. It's, as we've been saying, currently on Kickstarter. It is probably one of the finest Master of Orion 1 clones. Homages is probably a better word that you will find. You can play a beta of it now. It's on itch, and it's really fun. I mean, it's not complete. There's only two races you could play, but there's not just 2 races in the game. There's only 2 races you could play.
Although you can pretty easily mod the other ones to be playable just by using the graphics from the 2 that are.
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't know that. That's pretty funny. But the great thing about it is, like, I'm finding as I get older, I need games to play a little quicker and respect my time because I don't have all the time in the world. And the great thing about a Master of Orion 1 style game is it plays fast. You're exploring, you're colonizing, you're fighting, you're boom, boom, boom. There's none of this, but I need to build a metal mine over here. I need to build a research lab over there, and blah, blah, blah. Nope, none of that crap. It is refreshing. It is really refreshing to find a game that doesn't want you to drown in the minutia of the typical 4X with all of its little fiddly bits. So it's really a nice, refreshing change of pace, and it makes you wonder why more people didn't copy the Master of Orion 1 formula, because it's such a good formula. But yeah, there's kickstarting right now as we speak. When does it end? As we're recording this, when does it end?
It was supposed to end basically midnight on the 27th, but I accidentally put the 26th, so it's actually ending at 1 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on the 27th, which would be midnight on. Sorry, 1 a.m. Midnight. It's ending midnight Pacific Standard on the 26th, which is 1 a.m. where I am Standard on the 27th.
Which is what? That's
Saturday night. Next Saturday night.
That's next Saturday night. So you have a week and a half to check this out.
There's actually a funny story.
Okay,
it was Canadian Thanksgiving yesterday. We have our thing.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving.
Different time. So just, to randomly curious, I was like, when was American Thanksgiving again? So I Googled and I see the 26th and I'm like, oh my God, this is not good.
No, November.
Yeah.
November. Yeah.
So I had a little bit of a mini heart attack.
Oh no. No. We don't have Thanksgiving in October. That would be very weird for us because we are so used to Thanksgiving being about a month before Christmas. And if Thanksgiving was before Halloween, I think that would really throw people.
I bet.
we would really be thrown if that happened. But yeah, folks, the Kickstarter is happening right now. The fee, I mean, what Jeff is asking for is modest. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But I wouldn't be torn up if I were to raise that much.
Right, but I mean, what I'm saying is, every little bit helps, especially with a modest goal like this one. Every little bit helps. So go check it out. Go to itch. There's a link on the Kickstarter, and there'll be a link in the podcast. There's a link in the Kickstarter. There's a link in the video. There's There's going to be a link on the MP3 page where you can go the itch.io and you can go to the Kickstarter and you can download the beta and try it out yourself. It is quite fun. Even though it is not complete, it is easy to jump into. If you've ever played Master of Orion 1, it's like riding a bicycle. It is really just like, oh yeah, I remember missile bases. Right. This is great. And, oh, got to put some money in research. Woohoo. But I don't get to pick all the research all the time. It's kind of like, oh, you might get this and you might get that. It's really a fun semi-randomized thing, which makes it much more vibrant. So it has really got a lot of potential, and we really want to see it succeed. So please check out the Kickstarter if you can, and if you can pledge, that's even better. But at least try the beta. That's free. At least go to itch.io and try the beta. So a couple of quick, notes before I wrap up. Tomorrow on the stream, we are going to be returning to EF2000 in the morning, which is very exciting because EF2000 is so freaking great. Thursday, we're returning to Far Cry 2 in the morning. And then on Thursday afternoon, for the LAN party, we're returning to Dying Light, which is always a good time. Always a good time.
If I may.
Yes.
Sundays.
Oh, yes, of course. Go ahead.
On Sundays, I know this isn't Space Game Junkies, but on Sundays, on my Twitch channel, I do a Star Wars Sunday stream from 5 p.m. Eastern time until whenever, usually six-ish hours at least, of just nonstop Star Wars gameplay.
6 hours?
Yeah, I've been going pretty long, and it's actually been pretty engaging and pretty entertaining. So it's kind of been my stress relief. We've had good interactions. We've had a few people in there in the chat, just talking all things Star Wars. Whether you like something, you don't like something, you love something, loathe something, we're all there to chat and have a good time and just enjoy all things Star Wars. So twitch.tv/the_table for two if you're interested.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and I've been able to stop by at least one stream, and I had a lot of fun. And KOTOR, you can't go wrong with KOTOR. You cannot go wrong with KOTOR.
So KOTOR 1 or KOTOR 2?
That's I'm going through KOTOR 1 right now, and the objective is to finish that one and then move on to the second one.
Make sure that you use the restoration pack.
I already got it queued up.
Perfect.
Yep.
That's the only way to play KOTOR 2, if I recall correctly.
Well, yes. Yeah.
And then
somebody needs to make a restoration pack for Sword of the Stars too.
Oh God, right. And then, folks, finally, next week on the podcast, we are going to kind of have an award show, looking back at the decade. We're going to talk about the best game of the teens, the worst game, things like best soundtrack, stuff like that. We're going to basically kind of have our own little award show, and some of the winners might surprise you.
Mass Effect Andromeda is in the running.
It is.
Oh no!
It is not.
It's in the running for worst game of the decade. Worst.
Well, they tried some interesting stuff, though. I mean, lad.
I mean, we could go off on another tangent. I love about Andromeda, but the short version is Andromeda wasn't that bad after they patched it.
That's true, actually.
Anyway, finish up, Brian. So take us home.
So, as always, we want to thank our Patreon supporters for supporting us via Patreon. You help keep the lights on around here, help pay for things like the green screen I use every day. If you want to learn how to support Space Game Junkie and make it a full-time endeavor, which is what we're trying to gear towards, you can go to spacegamejunkie.com/support, and you'll find links to Patreon, our merch store, a Teespring, affiliate links if you want to buy a thing on Humble. That kicks us a few bucks, that sort of thing. So it's all there at spacegamejunkie.com/support. Plus on spacegamejunkie.com, we also have news and all sorts of things. It's a pretty fun site. Links to our Discord, which if you haven't visited our Discord, you should. It's such a great Discord. And I don't want to be too promotional, so we're going to wrap it up here. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening and engaging and watching. And if you can, go to the Dominus Galaxia Kickstarter and back it. At the very least, download the beta and try it. And then back it.
And if you can't back it, tell your friends.
Yes,
exactly.
Maybe you know someone who's interested. Let them know so they can back it if they can.
Good point. Very good point. I always forget about the tell your friends thing. Don't tell your friends about Space Game Junkie too. I never say that, but yes, please tell your friends about that too. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us tonight. And we will see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific with some EF 2000. Have a great day, y'all.